we will do some stuff. Okay, so today we are going to talk a little bit more about kind of the sleep pressure systems. We talked a little bit about last week. Then we're going to nerd out about the circadian rhythms. And then I'm going to review all of our action items of things that we're working on to help improve your sleep. To recap, the last couple of weeks, we're on week 3. If you haven't done the 5 whys activity, go ahead and do that. This really kind of narrows in your reason for wanting to address your sleep at this time versus any other time, like a month ago or a year ago. Also, I'm doing this activity now, so it's also one of the reasons why you're probably doing it, but understanding your underlying motivation. So it's not just to feel better, but it's to maybe have more meaningful relationships with the people in your lives. So go through that activity if you haven't yet. There's also a sleep questionnaire that I shared. Do that if you haven't yet. And then we're continuing our 5-minute habit. So this could be any activity that you're taking a dedicated, 1 to 5 minutes a day to work on. That might be the journaling, that might be the breathing. You guys kind of all created your own activity. Last week, I sent over that perceived stress scale questionnaire. If you haven't completed that, go ahead and do that. Just for a baseline for yourself. You don't have to share it with me. This is something that you can kind of check in on every couple months and just see if things are changing. Donna made a great point. I forgot to include this. If you haven't started doing your sleep diary, so that sleep log, that's also a helpful piece of information, really similar to a food log if you're trying to improve your eating habits, just understanding what your actual sleep patterns are. Writing it down makes a big impact versus just trying to remember what happened 3 days ago. You're continuing your 5-minute habit. If the first week didn't work, you can always change your habit, but we're trying to do about 2 weeks with your habit before changing or adding to it. And then we started introducing the stress management techniques. So that might be yoga or meditation or going for a walk outside. And we can talk more about that if you were unable to figure out a stress management technique that works for you. Before I get into the circadian rhythms, kind of what we talked about last night, that there are things that kind of increase us being awake and then decrease the sleepiness. So there's that little teeter-totter lever that we're trying to play around with. One of those things that can impact that is our circadian rhythms. So this isn't the woo stuff that we maybe thought about with circadian stuff from I remember it being a kind of woo or flowery 20 years ago. There's a lot more science and research behind it. In fact, these guys, won a Nobel Prize because of the research they did with the mechanisms of controlling circadian rhythms. So we're going to nerd out about this a little bit. So anything we can do to follow that lever. So as the day increases, we want to be sleepy at the appropriate times, and then we want to sleep and then be awake, at the appropriate times. A lot of the stuff is going to help with that. So what does that mean? Just with our circadian rhythms. A lot of it's going to start with lightness and darkness. So being able to wake up, before and expose yourself to light as soon as possible. Ideally outside and going for a walk so you can get the sunlight. I myself am often up before the sun rises. So having a lamp or some type of artificial light will also help with that. Same thing as we get into the evening. So turning the lights down if you have a dimmer switch to start making the environment darker as the sun goes down. We'll also get into a little bit with our screens. So TVs, tablets, phones, that blue light mimics sun in our brain. So that actually makes us want to stay awake. And that's why you can binge watch TV shows so easily. One, it's entertaining, but two, that light kind of keeps us awake versus wanting to fall asleep with our natural rhythms. And then Peggy kind of talked about this before we jumped on our recording, but trying to come into that regular sleep and wake time. So keeping those really close together every day of the year. Granted, there's going to be occasions where you have actual like jet lag from like flying to a different location in a different time zone. There's social jet lag. So going out for a friend's birthday on a Saturday night and you're out until like 2 a.m. Those are going to be the exception versus the rule. So trying to keep those regular sleep time, wake times really consistent. Then we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition, food timing with our chronotypes, exercise and movement. And then one of the things I might ask you to do this week is to play around with the temperature in your house. So temperature makes impact as well. If you haven't taken this quiz yet, I shared it, I don't know, like 2 months ago on our weekly email. I'll include this in our discussion chat box, but there's a quiz you can take to discover your chronotype. And the chronotype is going to kind of talk about your ideal wake time, sleep time, when movement was going to help, etc. I'm going to just kind of flash through these slides really quick because if it's not your chronotype, like who cares? But you'll get more information once you actually take the quiz and learn more about it. For example, if you are a lion, there's 4 different types. A lion, you have a tendency to, you're going to thrive if you like wake up early, you're really productive in the mornings, you like to go to bed earlier. This is about 15 to 20% of the population. And then if you look at more detail with the lion, you can kind of see like what an ideal timing schedule might be. Understanding that this is not necessarily realistic to the real world, but you can kind of see like what that might look like. So waking up, this is one of my examples. So waking up at 5 to 6 a.m. So this might be a daylight nap, a daylight lamp that you need. And then you can kind of see what happens throughout the day. This is for you if you have questions on it. We can talk more about it, but for now, take the quiz and then there is an email that you're going to get with it, which will talk more about your chronotype. And there's a really great TED talk that he did if you want to learn more, and that email that you're going to get once you complete the quiz. I'm just going to go 1 through 1 question and answer, and then that's going to be it for today after I talk about your homework for the week. So I know I talked to Donna and Peggy, and I think Tara also brought this up. If you have a bad night of sleep, like what's next? Are you just screwed for like the next couple of days? Just talking more about this. So this is your sleep depth, sleep depth. So after one night, a bad night's sleep, right? You're up, can't go back to sleep. Peggy, like you're once a week, all-nighter type thing. So you're, it's not great after the next day, but if you get back into your normal pattern as soon as possible, you can see after a couple of days, you're almost back to normal. So it's not going to be like you just are screwed. But the key is to go back to your normal pattern and not try to overcompensate by like taking a really long nap or like pounding coffee, because that's just going to disrupt your pattern and it's going to increase the time that it takes to get back to normal. So Don, you've done a great job with this of just kind of like positive thinking and like, oh, even though I had like a bad night, that's okay. Like, no big deal. Not the end of the world. Don't overcompensate, get back into your pattern. And the big thing is like your bedroom, just a reminder, is for sleeping and for sex. So if you're doing other activities in the bedroom, try to start limiting those as much as possible. So no TV, no just like lying in bed, staring at the wall, trying to avoid that as much as possible. The last thing, kind of talking about just our light and darkness again. So this is after a bad night's sleep, but also just a good pattern to get into is hitting up that daylight first thing in the morning, reducing the lightness a couple hours before bed, and then complete darkness in the bedroom. So they've done like some studies where a person's in a completely dark room asleep and they took like a little flash, like a pen light, like a really small pen light, and like hit it on their foot, and their sleep was disrupted. So even just a little bit of lightness while you're sleeping can disrupt your sleep a little bit. So as much darkness as you can. If you can't do that, a mask over your eyes is really a great alternative. This is a cool podcast. I listened to it a little bit this morning, and man, he has a really like just boring voice. So if you are not having success with like those meditation apps or like calming music, and find that your like brain just goes into override, he like teaches topics. So you're like listening, but it's so boring. A lot of people have had success of like being able to fall asleep while listening to this guy talk about stuff. So this is called the Sleep With Me podcast. Another little resource that might be helpful. And then I'm going to leave you with our homework, which is going to be continuing your 5-minute habit. I'm going to talk through this. So 5-minute habit. So you can add a new one if you haven't done that yet. You can also continue with what you're doing. So if you're having great success, adding anything new seems too stressful, don't do it. Stay with that habit. That's awesome. If you haven't started stress management stuff, start the stress management techniques. And that could be the breathing. It could be yoga. It could be, it could be like a coloring book while you're listening to music, like gentle, like background music, not with the TV on. It could be knitting. It could be playing, like if you're doing like guitar scales or something, Donna, that's just like really just soothing and just like in the rhythm, like you can just like zone out in. Those are all great things. And then take the chronotype quiz and then kind of learn a little bit more about that for yourself. Cool. Do you guys have any questions that you think would be helpful for the group before I just turn it off? Peggy? You're unmuted.
So question that you talk about devices, that blue light being disruptive to sleep at night because it kind of mimics light. If you don't want to go outside first thing in the morning for sunlight, does getting on a device end up mimicking that light? Does it have an impact on the other end of the day?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm inclined to say maybe. So I think the overarching goal is to get as much natural like stuff, and you're not relying on a tablet or a device as much as possible. That'd be an interesting experiment. If you can't get sunlight first thing, if you're going onto your phone and seeing if that helps mimic the sunlight, that might be a cool experiment to try. The daylight lamps work really well. So I like those if you can't get up. I have a red light thing in my bedroom that I use that also does that. But you also bring up a great point. So if you, I love to read in bed on my phone, which, is not ideal, but I'll wear blue light blocking glasses. So there are things that you can do to block that blue light so you can still be on a device a little bit longer if you're having a hard time like shutting down. So I wouldn't spend more than $10 to $15 on the glasses. They definitely have like really expensive ones that look awesome, but until you like know that it works, there's like $10, $15 solutions. Cool. Good question. I'll look into that device thing a little bit more though and share that. Any other questions? Cool. So if you're not here, this is the end of our time together. But Donna and Peggy, if you guys want to hang out, I will answer